Good morning, everyone. Good morning, members. Afternoon, sorry. Good afternoon, members, officers, and members of the public joining us today. That was a good start. Welcome to this meeting of the Climate and Environment Advisory Committee. My name is Councillor Dr. Lisa Redrup, and I will be chairing the committee today. To my left is Councillor James Rickson, who is also Vice Chair of the committee. Our first item is item 2, apologies for absence. Habs, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Jeff Harvey, Dr. Martin Khan, Bunty Waters, and our lead cabinet member, Councillor Natalie Warren-Green. Yeah, that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Then we're on to declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to any item of business on the agenda? Okay, thank you. So if any interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, please can you raise it at that point? Okay, so next is minutes of the previous meeting. That was held on the 8th of July 2025 and is attached to the agenda. Does anyone have any comments that they'd like to make? Okay, I do have one small amendment that I would like to make, which is near the bottom of page 7 of the agenda pack, in the text where we're talking about the possible addition of gardens to biodiversity net gain. It's in the sentence where it says members were advised that small vegetated gardens were currently not included under BNG. And then the second, that's as it's written. And then I'd just like the next sentence to say, Councillor Martin Khan commented that, and this is the addition, if gardens were included under BNG, this would at present be difficult to achieve. So it's just a small change for clarity. So I hope that's okay with everyone. Okay, so can I take the approval of the minutes with that small amendment by affirmation, please? Oh, so Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Sorry, Chair, I wasn't at the meeting, so
you'd like to?
I'll abstain.
You'll abstain, okay. Okay. So I think we can take it, but with 2 abstentions from Dr. Bear, Councillor. Is it Dr. Bear Park or just Bear Park? Councillor Bear Park and Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins. Is that okay? So thank you, members. The minutes of the meeting are agreed as a correct record. So then we're on to public questions. We've received one eligible question from a member of the public who is joining us virtually today. Do we have Ms. Spain online, please?
Yep.
Hello.
Apologies for the misleading name. That's my work name. So, yeah, Elizabeth Spain, that's me. Should I go ahead and read out my question?
Yes, please do so.
Okay. So I'd like to ask the following question in relation to the County Council and South Cambs County Council contract with Regen for processing our blue bin waste in Northern Ireland. I believe that approximately 56 tonnes of CO2 are being produced per week for the 400-mile transportation of our blue bin waste to Northern Ireland. This would seem to go against South Cambs Council's target to reduce our carbon footprint by at least 45% in 2025. Although there was some promise from Regen to relocate the processing to the UK mainland, the timing for this seems to have shifted from April to then June and now to the end of September of this year. Would the committee agree to exert pressure on those responsible for this contract to get a commitment from Regen on a date for the promised facility on the UK mainland, or if this is not forthcoming, to find a suitable alternative provider?
Thank you for your question, Ms. Spain. I've got an answer that I'm going to read out for you now. So, as one of the committee's vice chairs, I'm happy to support your request by asking the officers who are already in regular communications with the contractor express that the sooner the recycling can be processed on the UK mainland, the better. I've also asked our climate and environment officers to report updates to this committee, although I acknowledge that they will have to be mindful of commercial sensitivities. In the meantime, residents can be confident that what they are carefully recycling in their blue bins is being reprocessed at a high quality facility before being made into new products. Regen Waste Limited was awarded the 5-year contract for Greater Cambridge Shared Waste Service based on their facility in Northern Ireland, which is one of the most advanced in Europe. It runs on 100% renewable energy and can correctly sort and recycle 19% more of the material from residents' blue bins than was the case previously. More effective sorting means better recycling options. For example, it is now possible for 95% of glass to be remelted and used for new bottles and jars, rather than most being used in road construction. So finally, in your question, you mentioned the impact of transporting recycling to Northern Ireland in relation to the Council's target to reduce carbon emissions by 45% by the end of 2025. Over the past years, the Council has put a huge amount of effort into reducing its own carbon emissions, starting with those under the Council's direct control. So later in this meeting, we will be looking at both the progress so far and then how we can go further in the draft climate and nature strategy for the next 5 years. One of the actions in the draft strategy is to reduce supply chain emissions through our largest contracts. This is a complex but important piece of work. So in the meantime, the Council does still take into consideration environmental factors in contracts, and part of the arrangement with Regen is that the recycling transported to Northern Ireland is making use of lorries that would have been returning to the facility empty. So yeah, sorry, that was quite long, but I will follow up and look into that for you and try and push for that to happen. And then I've tried to explain why we have that contract at the moment. So do you have a supplementary question?
No, but thank you. It's good to hear that you'll be looking into this and that you've asked for regular updates. Yeah, I'm sure that I and many other South Cambs residents will be very interested to follow those updates. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
I'm going to leave the meeting now, but thank you for giving me this time to ask the question.
Thank you, Ms. Spain. Okay, so then we're going on to item 6, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan Annual Review Report 2024 to 25. We've got Ellie Haynes here who's going to present this item. Would you please do that for us?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so Orla and I are going to do a bit of a double act here, and I will present the first part of the report on the greenhouse gas emissions accounts and then hand over to Orla to do the second half on the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan update. So this report details progress on the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan as well as the greenhouse gas emissions accounts. And it's recommended that the committee notes this report and progress made against the actions in the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan, as well as progress against the greenhouse gas emissions targets, and provides comment on both of these. So this report details updates for the 2024-25 financial year, and members may note that progress against some of the actions has been furthered since the writing of this report, but any progress since April 2025 will be accounted for in the 2025-26 reporting. So I've got a bit of a presentation to share with you. Excellent. So a bit of a reminder of our targets for our greenhouse gas emissions. So we have targets for both our own estate and operations and also area-wide targets. And so these are for a 45% reduction by 2025 and a 75% reduction by 2030 on our own estate and operations. And these are both from a 2018-19 baseline. And for area-wide targets, then it's for a 50% reduction from 2030 and by 2030 and net zero by 2050. We've also got a number of sub-targets for specific elements of our emissions, and these are for our fleets and for South Cams Hall. So for our fleet, this is for a 50% reduction by 2025 and for a 90% reduction by 2030. And these are all from a 2018-19 baseline as well. And our targets for South Cams Hall are for 50% reduction by 2035 and 75%, 2025 that should read, and 75% by 2030. And for our greenhouse gas emissions, we include the following. So that is for Scope 1, that is our direct emissions, and that includes our building gas usage and vehicle fuel in our waste fleet from our waste vehicle collections. Scope 2, which is indirect emissions, so that's grid electricity usage. And Scope 3, we currently only include business travel at the moment in Scope 3. So looking at where we are for our own estate since 2018-19. So in 2024-25, our gross total emissions were 1,363 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. And using, and there you can see that they fell by so gross emissions fell by 27% from that 2018-19 baseline. And if we use a market-based method of reporting, which is where we look at our emissions from renewable sources, so where we purchase our electricity, and we have a REGO certificate, so we have a guarantee that electricity is coming from a renewable source, then we can record that as zero using a market-based method of accounting. So factoring this in, then emissions reductions were 36% from 2018-19. But to note, when we do our accounting, we have to look at both of those different methods of accounting within the reporting. And so you can see that our greatest emissions reduction was in South Cams. You can see that these were in South Cams Hall, which is reduced by 65% since 2018-19, and our LED lighting, which is reduced from, and that's our street lighting, which is reduced by 84% since 2018-19. And yeah, you can see that is that light blue second top bar there, and you can see that kind of significant reduction there. And South Cams Hall is that bottom bar, which has slowly been reducing as well. So you can see that the difference that the greening of South Cams Hall project is making to our emissions. And that is largely realised in a significant reduction in our gas usage as well. So just to note some key challenges that remain. So we should note, obviously, fleet remains a substantial proportion of our emissions at 70%. And as you can see, that is that sort of large dark blue bar there. That just to note that is not factoring in the purchase of our newer fleet, whereby that was undertaken in the new financial year, and that will allow us to use a lot more HVO in our fleet. So we should see a reduction where those new vehicles can use HVO. And just to flag one slight amendment in the report, in Table 1 there is a footnote which currently reads Cambridge County Council, which should read Cambridge City Council, so I apologise for that one, but just to note that there should be an amendment there. And another point of focus should be that our business mileage remains quite a high proportion of our emissions still, and so there are actions when we get to the new strategy later on to look at how we can start thinking about reducing our business mileage a bit further. Challenges that remain with our emissions will be the introduction of the mandatory separate food waste collection, which is mandatory, and we have to do that, whereby we'll be required to purchase additional vehicles to deliver this, so that will be a challenge for our emissions reductions in the future. And another one is on our small sites, which includes our sort of communal lighting facilities and also communal rooms on our social housing estate. And a challenge arises here in, balancing the needs of our tenants and making sure that we're providing those essential services, but also making sure that we can make those emissions reductions where we can. But sort of that balance is needed there. And looking at our area-wide emissions, apologies, that's quite small from here, but this shows our area-wide emissions in 2023. This data is provided by the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, so there is a 2-year time lag on this data. So the most recent data we have is for 2023. They fell from 2021-22, and they reduced by 38% since 2005. Much of this emissions reductions is due to reduced grid intensity and also reductions from industrial sources. But our largest emission source remains from transport. So just to note some sort of further information about our emissions. So we benchmark our emissions against other authorities, and we do this through the APSI Climate Change Benchmarking module, where we're able to anonymously compare our emissions with authorities of a similar size and makeup, and so that's a helpful that helps us to understand where we are in our progress against emissions, especially given that we sort of operate in a different context to other, say, urban authorities or larger, types of local authorities. We also do continue to look at improving the accuracy and scope of our emissions and sort of improve on what we're able to capture within officer capacity. And so we're working with the data team to explore possibilities for improving the collection and calculation of our greenhouse gas emissions. Looking at what might be possible there. So I will stop sharing my screen and hand over to Orla for the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan section.
Thanks very much. Pull that a little closer. So as part of this annual review, updates have been gathered for all 50 actions on the Zero Carbon Doubling Nature Strategy Action Plan, and these were provided by colleagues across the council. So there's lots of information. The full updates are in Appendix 1, so I'll just go through the sections, following the sections in the report, and pull out some highlights. And as Ali mentioned earlier, the reporting period was up to the 1st of May 2025. So the first section that the report covers is reducing consumption of resources and waste. So as always, the waste team have been busy completing a volume of projects in the last year to decrease waste, promote recycling and support the transition to more circular consumption habits. Last year saw a particular focus on repairing and recycling electricals and cables, with 9 additional temporary collection bins placed in community hubs as part of the Great Cable Challenge, collecting 2,000 cables for recycling. Section 2 in the report is around planning and land use, so there are not so many updates in this section, but the planning service continues to encourage developers to go above and beyond existing policy requirements for sustainability, and as I'm sure members are aware, the emerging local plan is going to be key to unlocking that further progress in this area. And then looking to section 3, so decarbonising transport. As Ellie was speaking on earlier, we continue to electrify the refuse collection fleet, now operating 4 electric refuse collection vehicles at Greater Cambridge Shared Waste Service, and the Waterbeach Renewable Energy Network project will unlock more charging capacity at our depot, with works due to begin on site from quarter 3 from 2025 to 2026.
And then in section 4, so housing and buildings, quite a busy section. For council buildings, a highlight update would be the completion of the retrofit of South Cambridgeshire Hall, which is now EPC A rated following completion of works on the 9th of August 2024. As for our council homes, after a successful bid to waive 3 of the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, South Cambs has been awarded £8.2 million, which will allow us to upgrade 610 properties to EPC Band C over the next 4 years, and that would leave 600 properties below EPC Band C, but the approach to improving energy efficiency in those remaining properties is detailed at 4.1.5 in Appendix 1. And looking to the 69% of properties in South Cambs that are privately owned, through our work in Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership, 77 privately owned homes were upgraded through the HUG 2 scheme, so the Home Upgrade Grant 2. And SERP have had further success with a successful bid to Warm Homes Local Grant for over £8.5 million, which will see South Cambs, as part of SERP, deliver improvements to more privately owned homes in the district. Looking to section 5, business and industry, a really positive year here. So through the Green Business Impact Programme, 34 businesses in the district access sustainability advice from experts. 18 of these businesses progressed to working with the consultants to develop 5-year net zero plans, and then SCDC was able to provide £127,700 worth of funding to 13 SME businesses to help them reduce their carbon emissions in various ways that were appropriate for their business. Section 6, food systems and agriculture. So many members of this committee will have attended our Sustainable Food Summit that was held in February this year, which brought together stakeholders in our local food system. And work will continue now to explore what a sustainable food network might look like in South Cambs. Section 7, this is our work around delivering training, education, communications and advocacy and engaging communities. So some highlights in our engagement work this year would be holding a meeting of this committee at Comberton Village College in October 2024, our local climate action conference, which is due to be held again this year on the 17th of October 2025, and also the 7 carbon literacy courses that were delivered to colleagues at the District Council, as well as a Swish clothes swap event to coincide with second-hand September, so also continuing that engagement work with colleagues in the organisation. And then section 8, the final section in the report, responding to the ecological emergency. So there's some really positive updates this year, including several grants given through the Community Chest Biodiversity Pot to fund community-led practical interventions to support nature, and through the Shared Prosperity Fund Green Spaces project, 8 further community green spaces have been developed for active use and to support nature. And these were a combination of parcels of land around our housing and also some parish submitted sites. So yeah, that's some highlights from each section there. And just a correction to the table on page 1 of the main report, there are actually 2 actions that should be set in that stalled category. So action 3.6.2, the car sharing scheme for employees, or I think an electric car club, that one's on hold due to high costs, not making that possible at the moment. Second action, 4.1.3 around solar PV at Elm Court. I think that's technically feasible currently, but housing colleagues will be monitoring and assessing ongoing against any technology developments that bring that project to viability. So yeah, thank you very much. I think Ellie will lead on any questions of the report, but happy to answer any too.
Great. Thank you both for putting together these clear and useful reports and for talking us through the work towards decarbonisation and hearing about all those successes that we've had so far. And it's particularly good to see that 43 out of 50 actions are green and in progress. So that is good to see. Does anyone have anything they'd like to say? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for your presentations. Interesting to see that we are making progress. It's always good to make progress. think my first comment will be on the 69% of homes that are private, and how the grant is being used. How do homeowners know that this grant is available? I think you mentioned Hug 2, whatever that is. I'm sure I've heard it, I just can't remember. But how do private owners know that this is available to them, and how many steps do they have to climb to actually get this? That's my first question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes. Thanks, Chair. So that we've basically closed the Home Upgrade Grant 2. That was funded by central government, and we, over the course of that grant, we undertook quite a significant amount of marketing activity to different residents and homeowners. And that included things like targeted letter drops to households which were potentially eligible, holding drop-in sessions in libraries. We held where they were kind of requested by specific communities. We, held community events to share that the grant was available to different groups of people. So there was quite a lot of targeted marketing activity to households which were potentially eligible for that grant scheme. The new iteration of that grant scheme is the Warm Homes Local Grant. And for that scheme, we've got quite a, because of the success in marketing that scheme, we've got quite a significant pipeline of households who are ready to undertake that, to sort of go through that grant scheme, and a lot which are sort of, on that waiting list for that grant already. So at present, we're not looking at doing any marketing activity for that scheme, but we're going to revisit that in year 2 of the grant scheme, or sort of later on in the year, to see sort of whether that is, assess whether it would be appropriate to do any marketing activity at that time. But at the moment, we have quite a significant pipeline of houses ready to go on that grant scheme.
If I may come back, I mean, significant, I deal with numbers. What is significant? 5, 10, 100, 2,000? What? Because it's, I mean, we had a question earlier on, if we're going to be aiming to meet our target, we need to be able to say, okay, we had, I don't know, maybe it was 10 the last with Hog 2, maybe it's now 20 this time around. I need something more concrete. Do we have any idea of what the numbers are?
I will need to, we do have an idea of the numbers. I will need to confirm that for you. I mean, to put it into perspective, in South Cambridgeshire for Hug 2, 77 properties were retrofitted. So I mean, I guess I use the term significant in relation to the amount of properties which will be able to put through the grant. But obviously, that is within the scope of the funding that we have, and to do anything further, that requires funding.
Okay, thank you. That's a good reference, because there's over 70,000 houses in the district. Right, so you see, it might be significant for the funding that we have, but in terms of the number of houses in South Cambs itself, somebody might go, what's that? But at least there is progress that, it is being done. I'm still not sure that all the houses, I mean, I still don't know how houses are qualified for this, but that's a detail. The big issue is our business transport. Do you think we're going to meet our target in reducing that big chunk of our, carbon footprint?
In relation to our fleet. So we have got, sorry, are you okay for me to
We were
answer
just
this?
checking if you wanted to come back on the criteria for the Warm Home Grant, or if that's something that we don't know off the top of our heads.
I mean, I'm happy to have that later.
Yeah,
We don't have
are
to
you-
have
okay.
it here, but it's just, it'll be good to know.
I'm very happy to provide the criteria for the grant scheme.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so how do we reduce our fleet?
Absolutely. So,
Carbon zero.
yes, so we do have the Water Beach Renewable Energy Network project, REN. So that is currently in progress, and that is the project to reduce emissions from our vehicle fleet. That project sort of looks at putting a solar farm next to our Water Beach waste depot, to as well as battery storage to fuel our vehicle fleet. In the interim as well, we're looking at using sort of a blended approach of using HVO in our fleet as well. The challenge will come with the mandatory food waste collection, which will contribute additional vehicles to that fleet.
Councillor Rickson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, agree. So I know we've had this discussion before, and I absolutely love acronyms, but could you just explain what HVO is and what we're using that in our fleet for?
Yes, that is hydro-treated vegetable oil, and that reduces emissions by around 90% compared to diesel.
Sorry, was that 19 or 90% reduction?
90.
90. Okay, thank you. Councillor Hawkins, did you have your answer? Have you got your answer how you wanted it? Yep, okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to comment or have any questions? Councillor Beck.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just in relation to the vehicles again, so page 14. It mentioned emissions from the Water Beach waste depot increased due to the increased usage of electric vehicle yard charger. So I suppose, on one hand, one measure is saying the emissions are going up, but presumably, if you could just confirm, emissions overall are coming down as a result of use of the electric vehicles.
Correct, yes. The overall emissions are going down. It's just from that, when you look at it source by source, then that from the depot, they are increasing. But that's just, overall that in comparison to diesel, that will represent reduced emissions.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I suppose I do have a similar concern to Councillor Hawkins about I suppose it's the cost of decarbonising that fleet, and where eventually the funds will come from to pay for those electric vehicles, because I know they're very expensive. And I suppose is there a plan, a kind of timeline for replacement of the HVO vehicles with electric vehicles? And I know the HVO vehicles, you've said kind of 90% reduction. Sounds quite high for something that's still burning stuff. But yeah, just in terms of the timeline of replacement of electric vehicles, if there is one, maybe there isn't because there isn't the budget available.
So is that Bodhi Hassan? Would you like to answer on that one?
Thanks for the question. It is a big challenge, like Councillor Dr. Tsumi indicated. At the moment, we have a fleet of 54 refuse collection vehicles. When the REM project is fully operational, we hope by the end of next year, we'll be able to charge 18 electric vehicles. That's the maximum. There is a program to buy those 18. We have 4 at the moment. So in the next 3 to 4 years, we should then be able to purchase the remaining 14 and have those operational. But that's then having 18 vehicles fully electric out of a fleet of 54. We can't do any more. That's all the electricity we can get. By April next year, we're going to add on an extra at least 22 vehicles, because we're going to start collecting food waste weekly. So that's increasing the fleet. Also, for every 3,000 properties that we build, we need a new vehicle, roughly. In the last 2.5 years, we built more than 10,000. So as time goes on, we are adding more and more vehicles. Electrification is not the only solution, hence why we're not focusing on that alone. HVO does enable us to mitigate emissions by very, very high, about 90%. The newer vehicles can use HVO, the older ones cannot, because they clog up the emissions, the engine block in the vehicles. We are getting a new fleet of 11 vehicles next year. They will all go on to HVO. So by about next year, more than half the fleet will then be using HVO. But the following 2-3 years, another 18 will all be electric. So we'll be getting nearer and nearer. But there will still be a huge chunk that we have a challenge with. The solution at the moment will be HVO. HVO costs about 20 to 30 pence more than diesel. So there's an economic impact. At the moment, it's not too bad. We're able to afford that. But basically what I'm saying is we're using all the tools we have available. Money is not the biggest constraint. We will need a few more solutions. At the moment, there aren't very many others available. So we're continuing to look at alternatives. It could be gas, but again, that has lots of complications. But for now, it's electrification and HVO. Perhaps in the next 3-4 years, hydrogen may make headway, but it's still very, very expensive. So it's a huge challenge that's continuing to grow because the service area is growing, we're adding more vehicles. But we are doing as much as we can at the moment.
Thank you. I wonder if I could just ask a follow-up question. Oh, sorry. Just on that, I was wondering if the grid was upgraded near the Water Beach plant, would that increase the capacity that we could have for electrical vehicles?
Yes, to an extent, because actually the latest information we have now from UKPN is that they're able to supply us more electricity. The other constraint, which I haven't mentioned, is the fact that at the moment, there is a limitation in electric vehicles. So the figure of 18 that we have for our fleet is not just based on finances, because if we could, maybe we could buy more. But at the moment, the way the rounds are configured and the capacity of electric vehicles is such that we can't run more than 18 rounds on electric vehicles. So that they don't have enough capacity to do 2 collection rounds. So at the moment, we've designed them in a way that electric vehicles collect in and around Cambridge and just around there. They're able to do that with the power they have and still come back with a little bit of charge left, just about. So if we begin to go beyond 18 vehicles, then 18 rounds, then we have a challenge. So it's not just electricity, it's also the capability of the vehicles at this point in time. Technology is not yet there.
That's very interesting, thank you. Councillor Timmy-Hawkins, Dr. Timmy-Hawkins.
Thank you. Yes, it's just the previous answer sort of triggered some more questions in my mind. Again, I'm somebody who likes numbers. So you mentioned that the HVO is more expensive than the diesel. I think what could be helpful is to know, okay, so with the current diesel that we have, it's like, what's the cost per mile that the vehicles run? And what's the cost per mile for HVO? And then we can better compare how much more expensive is it. Because when it's expensive, it's expensive. Yes, it's all expensive. I'd rather pay less than £1 for petrol, but I can't. That then just helps us to be more, I guess I just like being quantitative rather than qualitative.
We actually, so the cost is 20 pence per litre more than diesel. So that's how much HVO tracks at the moment. It varies between about 20 and 25. It's about 20 pence per litre now. And so far, with our budget, we budgeted for that. We can't afford to pay that. So we're buying that easily. So sometimes HVO prices go up. A lot of people are now using HVO instead of electricity. But so far, we haven't felt that pain yet. So we budgeted this in advance, and we're able to buy as much HVO as we need to at the moment. So the constraint now is not on the cost of HVO, but it's on the age of the vehicles. So once we change the next batch of vehicles, all the newer vehicles will be on HVO. And then we'll still have maybe another 15 or so vehicles that will be due to be changed the following year. So once those are changed, so we cannot use HVO on older vehicles. So that's the other constraint. But at the moment, it's tracking about 20 pence per litre more than diesel.
No? Is there anything anyone else would like to ask? Oh, Councillor Bearpark.
Just one, while we're on vehicles then, and it is the biggest source of emissions for the council, is, I suppose it's something that I've advocated for before, is just in terms of green waste bins and I suppose the amount of garden waste that the council moves around is quite substantial, and when it's wet, it's very, very heavy. So I've kind of advocated in the past for home composting, and to see if there's ways that we can encourage people to home compost more. I suppose the thing about home composting is if you've got a small garden, you only need to have a small area of your garden for composting. If you have a large garden, it's the same proportion, probably, of your garden that you need to allocate for home composting. So it's not as if we're putting a bigger burden on smaller gardens to do home composting. But the other advantage is, of course, if people are generating their own compost, they then don't need to go out and buy compost from a garden centre, which may be, with peat in it and all sorts. I just see that this, if we can encourage more home composting, it would have so many positive benefits in terms of a kind of circular economy. And I know we've done some things in terms of publicising this, but I'd certainly like us to see doing more on the home composting front if we can, and encouraging that much more in the future.
Thank you for that, and we'll take that on board. We do have quite a huge scheme across the county via RECAP that offers discounted home compost bins. We could do a lot more to promote that. I think the challenge we also have is that not everybody buys into that, but we can increase awareness, because no matter how little the amount of waste people produce, even if the bin is only 5% full, some residents still want it to be emptied. So they'll put the bin out, and if we don't empty it, then they're going to be very, very happy. But I take the point on board. There's more that we can and we will do to promote home composting to those who are more willing to do that.
May I add to that? Is there a way we can encourage people with incentives? I don't know what the incentive needs to be, but if we can go, I don't know, free something, whatever, something that will encourage people, rather than I just get the bin. You have to pay for the bin. Yes, you get a discount, but why do I have to pay for the bin? What do I get for it? What's in it for me? Maybe that's what we need to think about, to encourage people to actually take up more composting.
We'll look into that as well. Thank you.
That's very interesting, thank you. I don't know how we get people to compost more, but we can think about it, can't we? Councillor Sanford.
Yeah, I've actually got a compost bin that was given to me by the county council when we first moved into the area in 2003. It's probably out of the council's budget to do something similar now, but getting good mileage out of it even 22 years later.
So, if no one else had any more comments, we'll look at the recommendations, which are on page 12 of the agenda pack, where it says it's recommended that the committee note the progress made against the actions in the Zero Carbon and Doubling Nature Action Plan, and provides comments, which I think we've done, and notes progress against the greenhouse gas emissions targets and provides comments, which again I think we've done. So if everyone's ready, we'll move on to item 7 of the agenda, which is Climate and Nature Strategy for 2026 to 2030. We've recently had revised recommendations to the report, so hopefully everyone's seen those as they were published yesterday. And just to start with on this one, I have a written statement from Councillor Natalie Warren-Green, as she wasn't able to join us today. So before I hand over to officers to present, I'll read out her statement for her. So she says, "Firstly, my sincere apologies for not attending SEAC today. Sadly, this has been unavoidable. I've asked that in my absence the Vice Chair reads this note of support for the pre-consultation draft to be taken to consultation. I have reviewed the document, commented and had my thoughts included in revisions. As the paper for SIAC indicates, a report to informal Cabinet on the 17th of June 2024 set out a proposal to begin the process of developing a new climate and nature strategy to replace the currently separate zero carbon and doubling nature strategies and accompanying action plan. It was intended that the new strategy would include actions to tackle both the climate and ecological emergency, as well as a focus on both mitigating and adapting to climate change. A greater emphasis would also be placed on the co-benefits arising from action on climate and nature to better realise positive outcomes for the whole of society. I am delighted with the result of the work that has been done. The combination of two strategies for environmental action works well and enables SCDC to tackle environmental issues holistically. I look forward to seeing comments from SIAC and suggestions taken on board to finalise the draft strategy to be taken to Cabinet. So there we go, that's from our lead on environment. So now we have Ellie Haynes and Grace Warden with us to deliver the report. Can I please hand over to you both?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as outlined, a previous report came to this committee to set out the proposal for replacing the separate zero carbon and doubling nature strategies with one climate and nature strategy covering 2026 to 2030. I'm pleased to say that the draft is now complete of the climate and nature strategy. Just run through, it was recommended in the report that this committee notes the report and gives comment on the draft strategy and the proposal for public consultation, including the changes to the Council's actions, and recommends the lead Cabinet Member for Environment approves the strategy for consultation. I'm just going to share some slides now, if that's okay,
Great, thank you.
to run through the draft strategy and the proposal for public consultation. So the new strategy sets out 4 key visions and principles to frame the action over the strategy period. This includes leading by example on our own estate, collaborating effectively across all levels of governance, prioritising actions that create additional benefits for the area, such as improved health and well-being, supporting a sustainable economy, and increased resilience to climate impacts, and finally, maximising any opportunities that arise to accelerate the delivery of our targets. We've identified a number of key opportunities and challenges throughout the area which will impact on the delivery of the strategy. The relevant opportunities include resident appetite for renewable technologies, as demonstrated by high uptake of rooftop solar PV, the strong legacy of upgrading community infrastructure through various grant schemes, and the number of organisations in the area with a focus on innovation and research. We also face several challenges, although depending on the context, there are instances where these challenges can also provide opportunities for mitigation and resilience. We face a continually changing policy landscape, highlighting the need to remain adaptable. There are also a number of limitations around our influence, which includes lack of land to improve for nature and our differing level of responsibility in different key areas. The strategy acknowledges our areas of direct control and when we can exert our influence to determine where we can have the greatest impact. The use of AI poses a challenge due to its energy-intensive nature. However, it also presents opportunities in areas such as efficiency. There are a couple significant ongoing challenges to note, which I think Ellie also covered earlier in her presentation. So this includes the balance between our resident and tenants' needs in our communal and small spaces, and then the requirement also to reduce our emissions in these areas. Another ongoing challenge, as covered already, will be the expansion of our fleet under the new mandatory food waste collections, which will obviously impact on our fleet emissions. So there are a number of key targets, existing targets, which have been carried over into this strategy from the previous zero carbon and doubling nature strategies, which are shown on this slide. These include a 75% reduction in our own estate emissions by 2030, a 50% reduction in the wider district emissions by 2030, and net zero emissions for South Cambridgeshire by 2050. There's also a number of new considerations throughout the new strategy. The first is that we'll be seeking a mandate to create a net zero target for the council's own estate and operation emissions, based on a strong evidence base of what is financially and practically achievable. The second is that we have assigned a value to the pre-existing doubling nature target based on DEFRA land use data, which aims at increasing land managed for nature from 7 to 14% by 2050. A key pillar of the new strategy is resilience and adaptation alongside ambitions for mitigation, recognising the unavoidable impacts of climate change on the district. The new strategy therefore includes a new target to ensure that communities across South Cambridgeshire are resilient to a 2-degree rise in global temperature. And lastly, the new strategy includes the creation of a prospective action register, which outlines potential future actions which we would like to take, but where there are current barriers to implementation, which prevents the council from committing to these in the new action plan. So plans for a public consultation on the new strategy are progressing, which will be launching at the beginning of October. It's not a statutory requirement to carry out a consultation on a climate and nature strategy, but it's really important to kind of allow us to gain access to information on the needs and aspirations of residents and key stakeholders on climate and nature, as well as potential barriers to action. So we have appointed sustainability consultants to analyse the outcomes of the consultation. And we've also built in sufficient time into the timeline so that we're able to fully review that analysis and incorporate the feedback of stakeholders that took part in the consultation into the strategy, the draft strategy itself. We're working really closely with Cambridge City Council colleagues who are consulting on their climate strategy over the same period to ensure that there's a joined-up approach to avoid any potential confusion with key stakeholders, and also kind of recognising the alignment of the strategies. So the consultation will be hosted on South Cambridgeshire's online engagement platform. There's also a lot of online and offline engagement planned around the consultation. There'll be a dedicated stakeholder workshop at the annual climate conference in October. And we're also planning to reach as many businesses, residents and communities as possible through a combination of online and offline promotion and also engagement events. So this includes social media, including potential targeted advertising towards specific demographics, our warm hubs and libraries, relevant forums, community forums and networks, schools, as well as internally colleague workshops and drop-ins. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and would welcome any comments or questions. Thank you.
Great, that was brilliant. Thank you very much, and thank you for the huge amount of work that I know must have gone into this 5-year strategy and consultation plan. It seems to me there's 2 elements, so I was wondering if we start with the draft strategy and do our comments on that, and then move on to any comments on the consultation plan. So if that's all right, I'll open up the discussion. Would anyone like to start? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins.
Sorry, I think very well done with the consultation document. It's quite a lot of information in there. Now, bearing in mind it's a lot of information, I just wondered is there a summary document that people can have a look at, and then that can refer them back to the main points in here? Because if they're anything like me, you've got so much going on during the day, you want to read this, but you just go, ugh, and then you put it down. and then it doesn't, I'm sorry, and then it doesn't get read. No, seriously. So, but if I can have a two-page, it's a two-pager, this is what's on, these are the main points. If I don't want to read more detail, I can go into the main document itself. Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so do you mean for the strategy itself or for the consultation process, or both? So I suppose for the strategy itself, we will be using the same consultants to create, I think, up to 5 kind of alternate versions or formats of the strategy for different audiences, and that will include a really condensed kind of summary that, yeah, a couple of pages, that kind of thing. And for the consultation itself, to make it as accessible as possible, for each of the relevant questions, that information has kind of been drawn out and included in the question itself or underneath the question, so people can read the full strategy if that's something that they would like to do, or it's just built into the kind of survey itself, so they don't need to be going back and forth. They'll have that information in the questions.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Erickson?
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. And through you, following on from my theme of acronyms, I've got 2 written down for my questions. So one is LNGS, so the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Local Nature Recovery Strategy is obviously something from the Combined Authority, and for everyone, I guess imagine all the people watching at home who are clearly, have been inputting into that consultation. So I'd be interested to know how, just the separation between this piece of work and what that is to us, and how it interacts under the Combined Authority and their local nature recovery strategy. And that'd be the first question. And do you want to answer that before my second acronym-based question? Yeah. So thanks.
Yes, so the local nature recovery strategy is a statutory document which is currently being developed by the Combined Authority, and that's in consultation with all of the different district authorities, and so obviously we have done work in promoting that consultation, and it's been to this committee itself as well. So that is obviously a significant piece of work which will provide a lot of information on the actions that will be able to be taken forward relating to nature within the district. To explain how it will relate to this strategy itself. So one of the, we note in the strategy that obviously we're conscious of the local nature recovery strategy coming forward, and potentially identifying actions which will be undertaken through the strategy timeframe. And so we're conscious that we want to leave enough scope to down the line include those actions as and when they arise. So this strategy makes reference to those actions which may arise, and when we do our annual reviews on the action plan for the climate and nature strategy, then any actions which arise from that will then be incorporated into our action plan for this strategy. Sorry, there's lots of I'm talking about lots of different strategies here, but yes, this will kind of refer to actions which come out of the local nature recovery strategy. We'll try and be as clear as possible in any communications about the consultation for the climate and nature strategy, what the differences are between the two, and why it might matter that those residents who have responded to that one also respond to this consultation as well, because I think that's really important that we capture as many responses as possible.
Okay, thank you, Ellie. Yeah, I think it was kind of tied into Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins' point about, as I have a stack of reports, and if someone's thinking, I've responded to that it's got nature in the title, it's a good thing, so it was just good to be clear. My other question, acronym-based question, which is you discussed, so Grace, when you're talking about doubling nature and value being put on, I think it was on particular land types, but I was just interested to know how this strategy might feed into the local plan, or does it feed into the local plan or influence? And so, the acronym here is BNG, so biodiversity net gain. Is that, it's obviously a planning element, but I'm just curious to know how this strategy relates to that plan.
Yes, so in relation to the local plan specifically, a number of the actions within the action plan for the climate and nature strategy relate to the delivery of the kind of climate elements of the local plan within the local plan. And so it kind of covers those actions which the local plan will, implement in terms of in the new local plan, the climate change elements of that. At the same time, with biodiversity net gain, it references the work that the planning department is doing on delivering that biodiversity net gain. So it's kind of that overarching strategy which covers those, tries to capture all of the different actions going on related to climate change in the different departments and teams throughout the council.
Thank you.
Right, to that.
Is it coming back into
Definitely
that?
coming back to it. Definitely, all of this work. I mean, if you look on page 87 of our document, you'll see it's sort of the achievements, targets, and objectives. 2025, it mentions, the LNRS. You like the acronyms, and also the fact that you've got local plan consultation that will be going on. In fact, there will be this. Almost simultaneous consultation going on, which is another reason why I was asking for a short summary so that people are not overburdened with information. Our policies do reference these strategies. So they are working together. I can assure you of that.
Great, thank you for coming back onto that, Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins. Councillor Sanford, did you have a question, please?
I did, but Councillor Rickson already asked it. I was going to ask about the local nature recovery strategy and how those positions. Quite happy with that as answer. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bear Park.
Thank you. So I realise this draft strategy is probably quite advanced now, and obviously a huge amount of work's gone into it. And I was really pleased to see that the doubling nature has been kind of quantified in a way compared with how it was before, because criticisms I would say I received from doubling nature previously was it wasn't very quantifiable. What does doubling nature mean? Here it's set out as, increasing the area of land managed for nature from 7% to 14% by 2050. There's also the quality element of it as well, but I won't go into that at the moment because that's probably a whole other topic. I suppose in the same way that net zero by 2050 has been criticised for being a kind of remote target many years in the future, and people therefore have tried to put in kind of interim targets to make sure that there is action now rather than all the action being pushed towards the middle of the century. I wondered whether similarly, given this is a doubling nature strategy 2026-2030, whether we should be looking at a target for 2030 as well. Because I appreciate this is an extremely challenging target from 7% to 14% over that period, is, given all the pressures on the land in South Cambs at the moment, that is an incredibly challenging target. But obviously, what we don't want is a situation where the achievement of the target is all left till nearly 2050. What we need to be doing is kind of putting interim targets. And I wondered if we could put something in for 2030, but I appreciate it's probably a bit late in the day for that. So just your thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, that's really useful feedback. Thank you. That's definitely something that we'll take on board. Yeah, kind of looking at that roadmap to 2050, because as you said, it's not that we'll jump from 7 to 14% in 2049. So it's, looking at those interim targets is definitely something we can explore. So thank you.
Sorry, Bodhi San, would you like to come in?
Thank you. And I think just to add to that, it's a good point you spotted that we haven't put in any specific net zero target yet. That's an area where we hope before the strategy is published that we can come back to members and try to agree a net zero target. 2030 will be a bit too soon for such a target, but one of the options we're looking at in the new strategy is the opportunity to offset. So whilst we don't have a definitive net zero target yet in the council, we're looking to set one sometime between 2030 and 2040 perhaps. But to do that, we need to be a bit clearer in terms of the path to achieving that. And the only path we can see at the moment is going to be via offset, i.e. buying the credits that we cannot directly mitigate ourselves. So that's one aspect of the strategy that we plan to bring back to members, if we can, before the finalization of the strategy and actually have a net zero target.
Just to clarify, you were saying net zero, but I was talking about doubling nature. Yes. Yeah, okay.
Okay. Okay, I had a question. I'm just trying to see what it was. Oh, yeah, I was looking at, because I know for this policy, one of the new things that we're bringing in is adaptation for communities for a temperature rise of 2 degrees, which in a way is a good thing because we're preparing, but obviously it's unfortunate that we feel the need to. So I couldn't see all that much on adaptation as I went through, so I was pleased to see that there was a point saying that there were plans to further emphasise actions on adaptation for communities, including vulnerable residents. And so I wondered if this was sort of looking at the actions that we've got in there already and thinking about the co-benefits, or if this was thinking about new actions. So, I mean, I guess for co-benefits, I was thinking all the work that we're doing to insulate homes, both for the council and for private housing, you know, that could have benefits for hotter weather. And I think I saw somewhere about air quality, introducing trees, and you know, if you had trees on active travel routes, that could provide shelter from the heat to allow people to recover and things like that. So I just wonder if that's the sort of thing you're thinking of, or if there are other things you're meaning by that.
Yeah, so it was something that originally in the strategy was almost kind of a thread running through all of the 7 key themes, but actually following feedback from leadership team and kind of further exploration, it's decided that it's going to kind of, it constitutes its own key theme really, because it is such an important kind of aspect of the strategy. So what we will look to be doing is, like you kind of said, those specific actions. So obviously health and well-being is a co-benefit of many actions, but there's things that already exist within existing strategies around health that are actually directly relevant to resilience, things around warming those vulnerable communities in winter, so heat blankets, that kind of thing. So we'll be looking to kind of draw all of that in under adaptation as a key theme. And like you said, the shading, all of those, so there'll be kind of specific actions around adaptation specifically.
Great, that's really good to hear, thank you. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to raise? No? Okay, so we've talked a lot about the strategy. We did also touch a little bit on the consultation, but does anyone have anything else they'd like to raise on the consultation plan itself? Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind this is supposed to be starting on the 1st of October, we need to start getting the message out there now that it's coming, I think. I only say this because obviously a lot of us local members have parish council meetings over the next 3-4 weeks. And if we can prepare them that it's coming, then they can make the point of looking at it when it does come out. I think is what came to my mind. And the other thing on my mind is when you actually get the results back and then having to compile. We've done something in planning where we've got some prop tech that helps us to look at responses and summarize them in minutes rather than days and weeks. Maybe talk to planning.
Do you want to come back on that at all?
Could you just repeat the first bit? So the second bit, that's definitely sounds really useful and we'll look into, but the first question. Could you just repeat?
Is how we get the information out to
Oh,
prepare.
yes, parish and town councils. Yes, so we're liaising
Members,
with, the parish and town council liaison officer internally, and that will be, something that will obviously be brought once it's launched, but maybe more consideration can go into kind of priming ahead of time so that it's, we can get as much engagement as possible around that.
I mean, I say that because I was actually yesterday and today writing my monthly report to my parish councils. Right, and if I put it, now I know this, I'll put it in there going, this is coming next month. So make sure that you do something. So it's there, you've raised their awareness. And it's not just buying, oh, we don't have time to look at it. That's what I'm thinking of.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bodhi-san?
Thank you. I think it's a very good point. Thank you, Dr. Councillor Tumi Hawkins. What we'll try and do also is, if it's not too late for this week, there is an update that the Chief Exec sends to members at the end of the week. So I think we can include in that a statement to all the members so that you can begin to please help us let constituents know that it's coming. So we'll try and do that for this week, if it's not too late already, so that you have something written that you can then send to all the parish councils and residents.
That's great. Thank you very much. Okay, I can't see anyone else. So I had a question about the consultation plan. I saw that you mentioned you were going to different groups to try and talk to them about it, and schools was mentioned, which I was pleased to see, and because obviously our young people have so many ideas and views, and I know it's kind of quite a big part of schools and what they teach. So I was just wondering if there's any plans for how this would be done that you're able to share at this stage.
Yes, so we have been running our climate education programme with schools for the last sort of year or so, and so we kind of hope to use that as a jumping off point to engage with any young people and schools around the strategy. Obviously, it won't be that typical, consultation format, but try and sort of, use that to engage in a kind of constructive way with the students who sort of take part in that programme. And then we're also conscious about linking in with the work of the Youth Engagement Service and making sure that we're aligning with what they're doing, and obviously they'll be doing stuff with the local plan as well. So looping in with different people and people who are already doing stuff with schools to make sure that we can speak to young people about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. It just occurred to me when you were just talking about the Youth Engagement Service. Are you aware of the Cambridge Room? It's what they call the Urban Room. Now, this is, I'm a trustee, and so is Councillor Katie Thambro, my opposite in the city. This is an opportunity, it's a facility for actually engaging local people, and we're going to be using them with the Greater Cambridge Local Plan to actually get information out there. Where, there is currently a sort of pop-up office that they use in the Grafton Centre, and so they've had talks where you've had people come and talk, and residents come and they actually ask questions and all that, but the information can be placed there and people can actually come and give their responses. So that's an opportunity, I think, that you need to look at more closely. I can link you up with them outside of this. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Dr. Tumi Hawkins. Would you like to add anything, or is that kind of all?
No, thank you. That would be really, really helpful. Thanks.
Brilliant. Okay, so if there's nothing else anyone wants to raise, we have two recommendations, and remember this I think was in the supplement. The first is for noting, and the second we need to seek agreement on. So I'll take them one at a time. So the first one, it's recommended that the Climate Change and Environment Advisory Committee notes the report and gives comment on the draft strategy and the proposal for public consultation, including the changes to the council's actions. So I think we've done that one. And then the one that we need to, so is everyone happy for us to note the report, given we have provided comment as necessary? Great. Thank you. Yes. And then the second recommendation is that the lead cabinet member for environment approves the draft strategy so it can go out for consultation. Can I take that by affirmation, please? Great, thank you. So then we're on to the last substantial item of the agenda, which is the retrofit guide early findings report. May I remind members that Appendix A was circulated after the agenda was published, and you'll find this as another supplement to the agenda pack. So for this one, we have Haynes and Madeline Foster here to present the item.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Okay, yeah. This paper presents the early findings report that has been developed as part of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Retrofit Guide project. The project is managed by South Cambridgeshire District Council on behalf of the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership, which now includes Peterborough. The project is funded by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. The appointed contractor is bioregional. The purpose of the Retrofit Guide project is to review and extend Cambridge City Council's Retrofitting Your Home guidance to encompass housing archetypes so that this can be used by all authorities across the area. This will identify and include additional archetypes applicable across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough to support homeowners to understand the types of measures and indicative costs to retrofit their property to improve energy efficiency, reduce energy bills, and improve occupier well-being. The Retrofit Guide project will produce the Retrofit Guide itself, which will be an external document for residential use. In particular, this is for domestic property owners in the able-to-pay sector, but it will be able to be used by anyone wanting to learn more about domestic retrofit. The guide will also be used by council officers who wish to reference it and for community engagement events. An internal technical guide will be produced as an accompaniment to the Retrofit Guide and will explain the methodology of the guide and its background for any queries which may arise on the guide. It will also explain additional information such as the substation data you will see in the early findings report. The technical guide will be for officer use. The early findings report has been created to provide an update on the research completed for the Retrofit Guide and will form the basis of the internal technical report. The early findings report you can see in the appendix of this paper is specific to South Cambridgeshire. Each authority in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough area has received their own early findings report. The Retrofit Guide will give domestic property owners knowledge on how to decarbonize homes cost-effectively. It will support local authorities in their communications regarding domestic private sector retrofit. It will provide a high-level summary of the total capital costs for retrofitting domestic properties in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, together with the annual maintenance costs for property owners and the annual running costs for occupiers. The Retrofit Guide is intended to support and encourage homeowners and landlords to appropriately retrofit their homes in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. This aims to result in reduced home energy costs, avoid unnecessary costs associated with poor retrofit, reduce energy demands in homes, which will reduce carbon emissions, and keep homes warmer for residents in cold months. Retrofit-associated positive health outcomes include reduced cold aggravation on existing health issues, prevention of illness associated with living in a cold and damp home, and reduced stress due to lower bills and a more comfortable living environment. We are developing a communications plan to promote the use of the guide. The Retrofit Guide will be hosted on the Action on Energy website, Action on Energy being the brand name for the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership. Authorities can link to the guide from their website so that we can monitor the uptake of the guide via tracking on the central website. If anyone has any questions, Ellie will be able to respond to these for you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for your report and for talking us through that. Does anyone have anything they'd like to start with on this one, please?
Everyone looks in my direction. So I guess I'll start. So firstly, yeah, thanks for the report, Maddie. That was really good. It was really clear. I think what was also really clear to me now is how, which is also great to see, how this is working. So that was an acronym for local. What's the name of the group? What's the acronym for the group of all of us councils working together?
CERP, so the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership, but that does now include Peterborough as well.
It does.
It does.
Yeah.
Include
So,
them,
okay.
Yeah.
So the fact it was really good, to see that this piece of work is developing and being led by South Cambs and developing the already in existence retrofit guide from the Cambridge City Council have produced, and making it accessible or more relevant to residents in each of the individual districts that are part of CERP that doesn't necessarily include Peterborough, but does actually include Peterborough. Yeah, that bit's clear. Okay, that's fantastic. So I think it's really, in terms of the technical side of things, I think that looks, it looks good. I won't go too much into that. I think that's unfair and not on everyone in the room. But I think that looks good. I think so. My main concern is, and we've talked about this before, is what to be aware of is how is this useful, and how is this useful to us, and how is this useful to residents going forward. I think it ties in with Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins' point when querying the significant retrofit that the Home Upgrade Grant has done, sort of about 70 homes out of, how many did we say, 70,000 or something like that. We've got such a large scale challenge ahead of us. I think it's just sensible to have that long view that the retrofit guide is not the end of the job. In terms of we've done that, now everyone can go on and they're all informed and can just get on and do things. It's the very small first step, and how we can support residents moving forward. So I think that's probably sort of sensible. So hence my questions about how this can be used, and I think you've touched on that again very well. That it's about sort of the marketing plan of how this guide is going to be put forward to residents. So I guess there's that. There's I don't know. It'd be nice to hear. So I'm trying to be concise. A little bit about how this will help officers, because I can see a number of ways this will feedback, like some of the work that's been done, and it's a huge amount of work, I think, and it's really great to see from everyone, but making sure that it won't ever go to waste, and that it can then inform the work of other officers and other departments, because it's not just about retrofit, but it's about supporting the upgrade of social housing, and then planning as well. I think of how we can approach planning. So I was kind of talking myself out. Shall I end with the question? No, I won't. I do. Very, very good. Well done. I'll leave it at that for the moment.
Ellie, is there anything you'd like to come back on that?
Yes, thank you. No, very useful and helpful feedback. So thank you very much. And yes, I think we're very conscious of the need to make sure that this, we make the most out of the data and the final product that is produced through the project. So we're going to be we're sort of developing a communications plan. And that will cover how we communicate the guide more widely, and how we, make sure that the word gets out there, that we communicate and we share it around it, but also recognise that that needs to be ongoing, and so sort of, you know, that will be supported through any action on energy communications that we, end up putting out there, and we're also conscious that, you know, in an ideal world, you'd be able to do something a bit more, you know, have something a bit more, you know, digital around it, and a bit more, you know, dynamic and digital. Obviously, unfortunately, within the scope of the project, we're not able to do that, but, you know, would like to look at exploring what we can do in the future around, you know, how this can be supported in a more, you know, digitally dynamic format, I guess, to, you know, to make sure that that it is of the most use to homeowners, and, you know, landlords as well. And then on your question around helping officers as well, I think sort of, yeah, we're really conscious of, I think sort of that's kind of twofold. So in one, Maddie mentioned around supporting officers, and that's officers of the, I guess, primarily of the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership, who sort of support on that private domestic sector on retrofit, around communicating with residents around retrofit and what might be suitable for their specific houses, and that could be sort of in specific home visits when they're going out, and speaking to different residents, and also I guess when we attend community events, and sort of I mentioned earlier around the work that we did through Hug2 around hosting events in libraries and things like that, then having that guide to support, to sort of help refer to people, you know, around what retrofit might look like for them. And I think specifically when we're looking at the different scenarios of retrofit in this guide as well, then, you know, it gives the different scenarios of, you know, a more shallow retrofit, a deep retrofit. So, you know, hopefully there's different options for different people, because obviously we know that some measures can be more costly than others. And then also, secondly, on supporting officers, I think that there's a lot of additional information around that substation, the substation capacity, and things like that. And so that will hopefully help to support the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership around that more strategic view of retrofit in the area, and how we, how we develop that moving forward and develop that picture of how we encourage retrofit throughout the region, and, you know, the way in which we do that. And so hopefully that element of the guide will support officers in a more strategic way.
Yeah, I'll come back. We didn't. Thank you very much for that answer. That was really great. Will it? You mentioned how it will help support SERP, but LEAP, so Local Energy Action Plan. You know, again, sticking on that theme of great acronyms. How will it support? Because again, it's done some really good work about looking at, I guess, you know, grid capacity. Will this piece of work go on to inform that as well?
I think they're kind of, it's quite difficult because they're kind of happening concurrently. I think the local area energy planning work is at that consultation stage, but I think we're conscious of, the officer within planning who's representing South Cambs on that local area energy planning work is aware of this this guide and this work going on, and also has fed in on the adaptation side of things. Adaptation side of things as well. So yes, we're making sure that they're kind of linked, but they're not kind of really, they're not, I guess, intrinsically interlinked, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just a shame, again, all of the work that's gone into it, just to being able to make the most of it, and certainly of that, the high level data analysis. Like, you don't want, you know, the least amount of times we can do that for everyone to be on the same page, that'd be great. So yeah, well done.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bear Park, please.
So a couple of questions. Just start the first one around the substation capacity. So I suppose I'm kind of looking at this with a very kind of critical eye, in that this is a very complex area, but my understanding is, the summary is that it basically said there's no problem here. There seems to be lots of capacity, and I am really surprised by that. And I worry that what hasn't been considered here is the growth in housing in our area as one aspect of extra demand, and another one is electric vehicles and the growth in electric vehicles. Perhaps if you were to consider the current usage of those substations and look at the capacity for heat pumps in isolation, you might get a rosy picture. But if you consider the other two things, I'd be really surprised if you do. Looking at slide 25, I think it is, it's got two graphs with information from UK Power Networks Open Data Portal. Oh, it's page 25. I think, is it page 25? 23, sorry, page 23. It's got the data for Longstanton Primary Substation and Histon Primary Substation. And I suppose my concern is, have those just been pulled from UK Power Networks website without asking UK Power Networks for their view on whether there is how this works? Because I wouldn't want to say that there is. I'd be concerned about a report that says there's significant capacity in this area without someone like UKPN having agreed to that type of wording for this. So I suppose the first question is, has UKPN reviewed this report on the substation capacity side of things? Do you know?
That is something I'll have to go away and speak to the consultants about on their methodology for this. I can feed back to you on that, but it's something which, both on the whether it's factored in the growth of housing and EVs, and also the conversations with UKPN. I will go away and speak to the consultants and get back to you on that.
Thank you very much. The other one is just around, I suppose, possibly partly covered by James, is there are a lot of barriers to take up of heat pumps. Obviously the cost of installation, the cost of running your heat pump system, which depending on which way you look at it, it may or may not be more expensive than a gas boiler at the moment. The main barrier I see is still people's boilers break down, and it's the middle of winter. And what they want to do is they want to get it sorted as quickly as possible. They don't have time to think about, oh, am I going to go gas boiler, or am I going to go heat pump? Now, a good thing about this report is I think it's a small step in helping people more quickly understand whether they could go the heat pump route. But beyond that, I think it needs to be kind of allowing people to quickly get in someone who can advise them at the point their boiler's broken down. And maybe something we could take from this is kind of, I suppose, guiding people to the next steps. So you can see that your house might be suitable without any kind of serious retrofit for a heat pump. So what's the next step? How do I, especially in the situation when my boiler's just broken down?
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I think it kind of feeds into the wider picture of what the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership are looking at in that wider just retrofit measures and the barriers to them in general. But part of that is heat pumps, and looking at the points at which people make those changes in their lives to upgrade their houses or undertake retrofit. And I think part of that is I think that we acknowledge that's a barrier, and it is part of our thinking when we're thinking, okay, how do we encourage people to undertake retrofit, and also as a partnership very much recognise the importance of, you know, those fabric upgrades as well, so that you can get houses to a point where they are ready for heat pumps as well, to make sure that they're operating as efficiently as possible.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. It's quite interesting to see the mapping, the EPC mapping that you've used, and especially looking at page 20 of the annex, which shows Linton, Sawston and Camborne, and the fact that there are houses in Camborne that need major upgrades. Camborne is what, 20 years old? That was surprising. But then again, when I think about it, the EPC methodology has its flaws. And I'm aware that there are some of the ratings that are given are based on assumptions because the inspectors haven't gone into the loft or haven't looked at something, and then suddenly, you know, EPC is D or E. I'm not sure, but I think I've heard that there might be a change coming in how the EPC is done, which might help. But my concern really is, again, the cost of making the upgrades required to make sure that heat pump, when it's installed, works well instead of your gas heating, because obviously it's the fabric of the building, windows, etc., etc. And if you look at an EPC form, I think I have an example up in front of me. Some of the costs of the retrofits, when you look at the saving, alleged saving, is almost like, why would I do that? For example, there's a building here that has a D rating, and the suggestion is floor insulation, £4,000 to £6,000. Yearly saving, £270. Now, a homeowner will go, why? How do we encourage them then? When you look at the cost of this, or even the flat roof insulation, 1,500 quid, I'm going to save 121 a year. What's the point? These are the things that people will be looking at. So I don't know how we resolve things like that, but it's interesting to see the areas where there are houses that still need upgrade when the houses are 20 years old. It's just weird.
Thank you, Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins. Councillor Rickson would like to come in on this.
Oh, yeah, sorry, thank you. So just a clarification on that before you go and ask that, Ellie. So thanks. Is Councillor Hawkins, those three maps, which one identifying in Camborne, that's maps that show properties that are heat pump ready. So the good news is, yes, they've only been built 20 years ago, but they were installed with a fossil fuel heat source. The good news is most of those properties are ready for a decarbonised heat source, so not necessarily requiring a retrofit. I think that was heat pump ready or require minor, or yeah, and then so the green is heat pump ready.
Yeah, but then there's all those that have no geoffreys required.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, but I mean the majority, I'd say, green in Camborne. But, yeah.
It's Camborne.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So it's not all of Camborne though. A few bits of Camborne. Okay.
Okay, thank you both, councillors. Officers, is there anything you'd like to come back with on this point?
Yes, definitely. I think, yeah, recognise that sort of there are still those barriers for people in taking on retrofit measures. I think especially where there's strong quite high costs associated with them, but also recognise there's different reasons that people might want to upgrade their housing, and some of those, although sort of cost does factor into it, some of those barriers might not be cost. So yeah, I think but yeah, definitely take on your point sort of recognising the high costs associated with it, and that might not be feasible for everyone. And I think that's why, you know, as a partnership, we want to, the Cambridgeshire Energy Retrofit Partnership, we're looking at, you know, how at the same time how we can, you know, encourage people to take up retrofit and overcome some of those barriers as part of that, you know, wider piece of work. And this guide is sort of one piece of that, but recognise that there's a whole other suite of work that's needed around this to, you know, support and encourage people to retrofit their homes. And it is still a challenge for the area.
Thank you. Councillor Rickson, did you want to come back?
Oh yes, thank you. So I guess two things. I think Councillor Hawkins has made a good point about cost of retrofit, and appreciate it's in, you know, the cost metric is an easy metric to define, and I guess so that question is, has there been any work or consideration as to how to communicate what would be referred to as co-benefits, or a couple of years ago be referred to as co-benefits, what now should be really clearly referred to as benefits of a retrofit, so it's not just the cost on energy saving. So in the report that's being produced on the retrofit guide, can that be, is there a way that could be put to cost? So we're looking at health benefits and comfort benefits. So there's that sort of thing. So that's sort of one question. So has that been looked at, and is it something that's going to be developed? The other part was coming back, Councillor Bear Park's point about not necessarily the boilers breaking down aspects of it, but it kind of touches on something that it's not necessarily I don't think referred to currently in the report about stage retrofits. So we've got retrofits, well, sort of the retrofit scenarios, so heat pump ready, shallow retrofit, and deep retrofit. But it might be really good to see at least, you know, 1, 2, you know, I'd say all of the typologies, but assuming that there's a limit to how much can be done, but how those typologies would look in a stage retrofit. And that could potentially cover some of the, you know, the scenarios such as my boiler's gone, you know, what do I do? Or, you know, at least that might be getting residents digesting, you know, if I was to stage this this retrofit because I don't have the budget, etc. You know, and to see how that would plan out, that might be a good thing. So has that been considered to be included, or will it be included?
So on the benefits, holistic benefits of retrofit, absolutely something which we as officers will be championing. It is included in the guide, and that's something from the beginning that we've been really clear that we want to make sure is clear. It's not just around, you know, carbon emissions. We want it to be about the wider benefits, including, you know, health and well-being, and, you know, comfort in the home as well. So I think, and as well, you know, we'll be making sure that we do that in our communication around it. And then on the second bit around stage retrofit, that is something which I will note and take back to the contractors and ask and get back to you if that's okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I had a question, hopefully it's okay. It's about the study on the heat pumps and whether the homes are heat pump ready. It looked to me like it was using a flow temperature of 45 degrees for the heat pumps. And I sort of heard more recently about high temperature heat pumps that I think might be, that produce heat more at a temperature more similar to gas boilers. So I was just wondering if that means that more houses would be heat pump ready, and if that's something we need to consider, or if there's a specific reason we're looking at the 45 degrees.
No, that's fine. I mean, I don't want to give an answer that I'm not 100% sure on. I mean, I think the justification around the heat pump ready approach to this is around, I think recognising that increasingly heat pumps are operating at higher temperatures, and so they're increasingly becoming a, I think that kind of builds on the case for people, being more comfortable with, adopting them. And so I think that wider consideration has fed into the report on the specific temperature and justification for that. I don't want to assume, and I could probably make an educated guess and an educated assertion on that, but I can go away and ask the consultants about that.
That's appreciated. Thank you very much. And yeah, I understand. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rickson. Councillor Bearpart?
Okay, thank you. Just coming back to the Camborne question again about the EPC in Camborne, Councillor Hawkins raising this. I wondered whether it was because Camborne, I think I looked it up, it started being built out in 1998, and the building regs were changed in 2003, I think, and maybe some of those buildings were pre-2003. But it would be useful if you could also ask the consultants, because it is surprising that Camborne has got so much non-green in there. It would be interesting to know what their view is on why there are so many non-heat pump ready houses in Camborne.
Yeah, I can take that away and ask.
Oh, great, thank you. Councillor Rickson?
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the heat pump flow temperature aspects of it, or the high flow temperature heat pumps. I mean, my gut feeling would be they're less efficient because you just than lower flow temperatures, so you're not getting as good coefficient of power, so you're not getting as much energy output as you are having to put the input. But if you could confirm as to why they've been excluded, or sort of high flow temperature heat pumps, it'll be good to have the answer, just so that it's so it's not us assuming. And I guess the other point is actually, which that's made me realise, is we talked about heat pump readiness. Is there an element of the retrofit guide that discusses other sources of domestic heating? So, and will those be recommended as well?
It's something which we've fed back and previously, and I will ask about how whether that will the extent to which that will be considered in the guide itself, and if not, then come back to you with a justification as to why that approach has been taken.
Excellent.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Does anyone have any further points on the retrofit guide? It doesn't look like it. So our recommendation on this is to note the report and give comments. So I think we've done all of that. So thank you, everyone. So then the last item is item 9, forward plan and any other business. Ellie, could you please give us an update on the next meeting? Thank you.
Yes, one moment. Just get to the right section. Yes, so the next meeting on the 25th of November will include a look at an update on the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough local nature recovery strategy. It will provide a report on the Green Business Impact Programme. It will include a report on the Zero Carbon Communities grants, which were awarded for 2025-26. Provide the final version of the retrofit guide, and also provide a report on our biodiversity duty ahead of the reporting deadline in January.
Great, thank you very much. I don't think there's any comments on that, so with that we're bringing this meeting to a close. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Orla Gibbons for her work during her time at the council. Apparently she'll be leaving us at the end of the month, so it's a shame, but on the behalf of the committee, I wish to extend our best wishes to you in your future role, so thank you very much. The next meeting of SIAC is to be held on Tuesday the 25th of November 2025. Thank you everybody.